All right, hello everybody, and welcome to today's LoRa Alliance panel discussion. Today's topic, we're going to address how cities are solving challenges all over the world using LoRaWAN. On today's panel, there will be four of us speaking. Moving from left to right here, the first one is myself. So hello everybody, I'm Jack Stuart, and I am the marketing director at TEKTELIC based in Canada. We also have on the panel today, Jose Fernandez, and Jose does business development with Aonchip based in Spain. We also have Yannik Kopp, and Yannik is the operating officer and head of sales with LORIOT in Switzerland. And then last, but certainly not least, we have Mr. Tony Tilbrook, and Tony is the CTO and COO of NNNCo based in Australia. So together, the four of us are going to provide some insight into how our respective organizations are driving innovation in the smart city space with LoRaWAN. But before we get too much into that, I'd like to just provide a very quick overview about LoRaWAN in general. So LoRaWAN is a low power wide area network technology that has truly emerged as a global communication standard. LoRaWAN is currently deployed in 161 countries around the world by 143 different network operators, and it's being deployed today for many different applications, which we'll get into some of later on in this panel. Some of the key differentiators and benefits of the LoRaWAN technology include the ability to be deployed for both public and private deployments, which we'll talk about a little bit more later in this webinar. LoRaWAN also accommodates firmware updates over the air. So one of the important aspects of LoRaWAN is ensuring that the devices that you deploy in a LoRaWAN network are very low touch. You don't have to, go out and be touching your devices very often. So to accommodate that, LoRaWAN, of course, accommodates the ability to send firmware updates to the devices over the air. LoRaWAN also allows for geolocation capabilities, so it gives you the ability to pinpoint your assets that are deployed in the field, even if those assets aren't equipped with traditional, cellular technologies or GPS technologies, that sort of thing. It accommodates bidirectional security, so of course it's important to ensure that any of the data being collected by a LoRaWAN device is only available to those who it's intended for. One of the most important benefits of LoRaWAN is its battery life capabilities. So being a low power technology, it's not uncommon to have a LoRaWAN device, sitting out in the field, collecting data for 10 plus years on a single battery. It allows for coverage in, rural areas that might not have traditional access to cellular networks. And then it's also accommodates very deep penetrating indoor deployments. So if you're deploying in a parking structure underground or deep in a building, LoRaWAN is an ideal wireless technology for that as well. On this presentation, we're of course going to be focusing on the smart cities industry, but LoRaWAN is used for many industries, including building automation, industrial IoT, smart public utilities, so metering, those types of things, smart agriculture, asset tracking. So if you are interested in how LoRaWAN is helping solve challenges in these markets, you LoRa-Alliance.org to learn more. But on this webinar, we're going to be focusing on how we're driving innovation in the smart city space with LoRaWAN. So without further ado, I'm going to pass it along to Yannik from LORIOT, who is going to tell us a little bit about what LORIOT is doing in the smart city space.
Perfect. Thank you very much for the nice introduction, Jack. So we at LORIOT have about 35 customers in the area of smart cities, and I would like to speak about one of them who really stands out against the others. And I'm talking about Darmstadt. And it's not just me who thinks like that. They were also awarded in Germany by the by Bitkom, like the IT and Telecommunication Association in Germany, as the smartest city in Germany. And yeah, I would like to give you some insights how they achieved this great goal. And first of all, it's how they managed to onboard all the different organizations within of Darmstadt. So they managed to onboard the citizens to their smart city movement. They managed to onboard industrial partners. They also got the city government onboarded and also managed to get the universities and the schools as a part of their smart city movement. And this really helped them to gather a bunch of different use cases. If you switch to the next slide, please. So they gathered all these partners and they identified some lighthouse projects because it was very important for them to make a smart city feasible and visual to the citizens, because often smart cities are just seen as a buzzword with nothing really behind it. And this was exactly why they identified these lighthouse projects. So like from all the different areas in the city, they gathered projects, implemented them and made them actually visual to the citizens. And everything or most of these projects are based on the LoRaWAN infrastructure that Darmstadt has set up in their own city. So if you switch to the next slide, please. So they built their own citywide LoRaWAN network, and they actually are hosting the whole software stack on premise in their own infrastructure to make sure that they can completely control the data flow, to know who gets access to the data, and also to have a really high value on the data security, which is really important for them. So actually 7 out of 10 projects they already implemented are based on IoT and LoRaWAN, which actually shows what a great technology is for LoRaWAN is for smart cities. And one really important aspect within Darmstadt, which is also especially important for me, if you go one next slide, please, is how they actually managed to get IoT and LoRaWAN into the curriculum of the universities and the schools. So they visit about 2 times a month, they visit different schools and universities around Darmstadt and present to them about LoRaWAN and IoT, and they are gathering ideas from the students and the school kids. And I think this is a really important aspect to make everybody part of a smart city and just not leave one group behind. And yeah, with this, I'm happy to give back to my colleague, Jack, to introduce the next speaker. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much for that, Yannik. That was great. It looks like exciting things going on with LORIOT and smart cities. I'm actually going to jump back in here for a couple minutes and just talk about what Tectelic is doing specifically in the smart city space. Over the past few years, we've developed a whole suite of LoRaWAN sensors or devices, many of which are actually being deployed by cities around the world today. And I've provided a snapshot of a few of them here. So on the top left, you see that's an industrial GPS asset tracker. So this device is being deployed to help our city customers with things like fleet tracking. So with snow plows or road maintenance equipment, any sort of municipally owned equipment that they need to keep track of, understand where it is at any given point in time. So we've combined the universal availability of GPS with the high reliability and scalability of LoRaWAN to provide a good solution for that. Moving down the page, this is a smart room sensor. So one thing that's common amongst all of our city partners, our municipal partners, is that they operate in typically very large buildings with a lot of people, and budget is always of utmost concern or importance to them, because they need to make sure that they're spending taxpayer money wisely, that sort of thing. So the smart room sensor, it can be deployed to measure, temperature, humidity, movement, motion, water leaks, light, open, close of doors and windows, that sort of thing. But really the intention is to be able to utilize the building that the city is occupying as efficiently as possible and be as cost sensitive as possible when utilizing the building. On the bottom left, we have our agriculture sensor, which was actually designed for the urban agriculture management solution. So it can measure soil temperature and moisture as well as light. It's being deployed worldwide today by indoor and outdoor, or by cities in indoor and outdoor city parks and gardens, as well as municipally owned golf courses. Actually, one of the key applications here is being able to measure and monitor, soil moisture in these public parks so that you can strategically deploy your water trucks or your maintenance crews as needed without having to waste resources in sending water trucks to areas where they might not be needed at that time. And then finally, on the right side of the screen here is one of our newer devices. Again, amongst all of our municipal customers, one thing that's very common is they have some of the highest restrictions when it comes to getting employees back to the office, back to work in this kind of COVID environment that we're living in right now. And so what this device is designed to do is to help these municipalities get their employees back into the office in a very safe way. And so what it can do is if two employees are back in the office and they come into close contact with one another, say 2 meters or 1 meter, whatever the company decides is considered close contact, those employees will be notified by a suite of alarms and buzzers and that sort of thing saying, hey, you're too close, step back. And then not only that, but that contact will be recorded and logged so that you can see who has come into contact with whom over the last period of days or weeks or months, whatever you're looking at. And so in the event that you do have to, say, quarantine somebody or isolate somebody due to a COVID diagnosis, you only need to impact the workers, the employees that have been directly affected instead of sending everybody home. Now, I want to just take a quick look at a specific use case that we're deploying with LoRaWAN here in the city of Calgary. So this picture you see here is actually an indoor urban garden called Devonian Gardens. And the city has deployed a whole suite of IoT devices to detect many different things, from soil moisture and soil temperature to air temperature, humidity, water temperature, water analytics, anything that they need to know about this garden. They're using IoT, using LoRaWAN to basically collect data so that they can, be as efficient as possible in managing the property. So just kind of a unique way that IoT, specifically LoRaWAN, is being deployed in kind of a urban city environment today. All right, so next up, I would like to pass it over to Jose Fernandez from Aonchip, and Jose is going to talk a little bit about what Aonchip is doing with smart cities in Spain.
Okay, so thank you very much for the introduction and all the presentations. Very interesting use cases, Jack. So I would like to talk today. Jack has introduced a nice sensors. I would like to introduce the possibility to control using the LoRaWAN technology. So, well, my name is Jose Fernandez. I am business development of Aonchip. Aonchip is a company based in Barcelona, in Spain. And I would like to talk today regarding the use case of the city of Girona. The city of Girona is in Catalonia. It's a nice city of about 100,000 inhabitants in the northern of Catalonia in Spain. It's a very touristic city with cathedral, Jewish buildings. It has been a filming location of some nice series like Game of Thrones. And the use case, it has been deployed in the gardens of the city, in the Devesas gardens. So next slide, please. The scope of the project is the efficient control of landscape irrigation. So the introduction to this project was because the city of Girona deploys its own LoRaWAN networks because they want to control their own resources, and they install LoRaWAN technology to do that. The problems that we try to cover with our devices are that the park maintenance people don't have control of the leach problem, malfunction in the irrigation. and they have to travel to each irrigation point to review the functionality periodically. The second problem that we found is that the maintenance people must change batteries of irrigation controller each 3 to 6 months because the technology that they use it. And the third point is the climatic conditions that the city of Girona have. The city of Girona during the summer, from June to September, needs to irrigate in a calendar of 15 minutes each 2 days because the high temperatures that it arrives till 400 Celsius degrees, 104 Fahrenheit degrees sometimes. The rest of the year, the conditions of irrigation change, so they have to reprogram the irrigations. The other point is that irrigation does not take account other external conditions like soil moisture or other forecasts. Next, please. So the product that we have deployed is the water sense. It's a product manufactured by Aonchip. It's a compact smart water control with MFC communication to connect with a mobile phone, and it offers a saving cost in the reduction of wiring connection and water consumption savings, and also the reduction of maintenance costs. The product is deployed with a dashboard that we show you later. Next, please. So here we can see an example of how we have been deployed the devices in the field. We need to put the moisture soil sensor in this case in the garden, in the landscape irrigation, and also we connect directly our device in the right picture. You can see the water sense directly in the box valve, directly connected to the irrigation valves. Next, please. And finally, this is the dashboard that we have implemented in the city with 3 modes of irrigation. The first mode is the manual irrigation. The second mode is the irrigation according to a program calendar to each valve, sorry. And the third way of how the maintenance people is controlling the irrigation is a closed loop irrigation, because we use the moisture soil sensor to trigger the irrigation and enable or not the calendar according to the value of the moisture soil. That's the more efficient way to control the irrigation for the people of maintenance. So the scope of the project is achieved because the people of garden maintenance have the control of irrigation. So thank you, and I pass the word to my partner Tony.
Yeah, well, thank you very much for that, Jose. That's great. Our final speaker today, as I mentioned, from NNNCo is Tony Tilbrook. So Tony, what is NNNCo doing with smart cities and LoRaWAN in Australia?
Well, thanks very much, Jack and Jose, Yannik. I'm very excited to be here and to be able to contribute to this Smart Cities Week. So thank you very much. NNNCo, just very briefly, we are a LoRaWAN operator here in Australia and increasingly around the globe with rollouts now occurring in the UK, a little bit in the US, other parts of Europe. We're working with other operators across the world as well. But one of the things that we're finding across cities and our use cases here in Australia, which have been the most pronounced in this, is that when we started to build these opportunities, what we found, of course, was, as has been demonstrated today, there are multiple different use cases with multiple different manufacturers and data coming from many sources. So we seem to have an ever-increasing number of devices, an ever-increasing number of sources of data, multiple applications to feed this information into multiple different communications technologies, and also multiple different end users who want to get access to this data. The last thing I think the city wants is something where we need to have, if you like, a position where we've got to feed this information to lots and lots of different people using lots and lots of different methodologies. So what we did was we built this product called End-to-End-DL, which I will get into a little bit more in a moment, but in effect, just outlining the problem a little further, you can see that we need some mechanism to bring all of this together, to aggregate this on behalf of our cities and our customers, so that we can bring together the various data libraries, the network products, without ending up with a multiple panes of glass for the city to be able to manage. A big part of that is security and managing that security and managing that data flow to the various use cases, from the various use cases to the various application layers and so forth. If you pop to the next slide, please, Jay. So the application layer that we've built really sits between the network layer and the final, what I would call value layer for the application. And that is a product that we've built called NNNCo, and it's our aggregation platform. It quite literally takes data from any device and any network. We primarily work in the LoRaWAN space, and of course, however, there is an opportunity for cities to be able to take advantage of the other types of communications technologies where it might be more suitable. For example, in the case where you may need a much higher bandwidth than LoRaWAN can necessarily deliver. And in that instance, you still want to have that information coming into a single aggregated layer so that you can deliver that in, and you get the use of that data across multiple different technologies for your own decision-making processes around the city. So we really literally take a feed from any data or any network source, and we really convert that into a single source of truth for you by harmonizing and normalizing that data in a multi-tenanted and multi-tiered environment so that you can then control via a group infrastructure to provide that information to as many different locations as you would wish. And as you've seen today, with all of the different use cases that have already been deployed here, you can imagine the myriad of others which are yet to come. Next slide, please, Jan. So I always talk about these 4 pillars of IoT, and really from left to right, and you guys all know all this stuff, but focusing on the LoRaWAN technology for the moment, we're really talking about devices or the generation of data on the left-hand side, through to the collection and management of data, through the gateways, and then feeding into what I would call the core, the network core. And effectively that is the network server, where we manage and actually control the data over the air. And then of course we push directly through into our NNNCo layer, which then helps manage that data and protocol. And that becomes the skin, the face and skin for the customer to be able to manage their data and their devices, which then pushes into the application servers, as you've seen today with Jose's application as an example. Last one there, Jack. One very quick use case, the Gold Coast, the city of Gold Coast. What we've done is really, the Gold Coast is actually using this data layer now and is bringing they have a very extensive LoRaWAN network which covers 1,300 square kilometers. We're running a very high density of gateways in that location, as they wish to use this network for water meters, and these water meters are all located under the ground. We've got a very extensive number of different use cases, including pump management going across this network, irrigation control. There are lighting applications now being used there, tracking, weather stations, waste management, wearables for their school event on an annual basis. Now, how do they do this? So what they really did was they standardized on the NNNCo layer to bring around all of the various use cases and focus it right down so that they could then get the advantage of these applications, share them to wherever they needed to be shared without breaching any of their own internal protocols or security layers about protecting. So that they need to protect, I should say. So from my point of view, just to really coin this off, we're really talking multiple use cases with multiple protocols and multiple endpoints. The product is intended, and the benefit is that we can aggregate and harmonize for the easy integration into the city's value layer, really the application. So thanks very much.
That's great. Thank you very much for that, Tony. That concludes sort of the panel section of this webinar. But before we wrap things up, I would like to ask a few questions. This first question I'm kind of just going to throw out to the group. Why do you think so many cities are relying on LoRaWAN specifically for their smart city infrastructure projects? Jose, maybe do you want to start off with this one?
Yes, thank you, Jack. Yes, I can give you the point of view here in Spain and Europe. I think that one of the competitive point of views of the LoRaWAN technology is the possibility that for the cities that they have to deploy in different ways. They can deploy the network in private networks or in pooling networks. So this is a competitive, very competitive point against other solutions, and the cities in general here we have so many cases that they want to control their own resources, water resources, and they are moving in the deploying of this LoRaWAN technology.
That's great. Yeah, just kind of a follow-up to that, Jose. What, in your opinion, what do you think are some of the other, competitive advantages of using LoRaWAN specifically for these smart city solutions?
I think that the other point is the standard of the LoRaWAN give the opportunity to the cities to decide in different solutions, because they, for example, can buy one solution from Tectelic or from Aonchip and include in the same solution, because they have a problem similar, for example, in the irrigation, and they can buy one sensor to measure the moisture soil and include also the remote control that is our device. They can combine together because all are LoRaWAN, they are all in the same standard, and this is very interesting for the cities. So this competitive is very interesting for the cities, I think.
For sure, yeah, I agree. I mean, it does appear that LoRaWAN has emerged as kind of an ideal solution, for smart. Tony, do you have any thoughts on this one? Yeah,
look, I really do. The what we're really finding, everything that Jose and yourself have just mentioned, of course, the just on the technology frame itself, if we think about the tech itself, the best possible efficiencies around the use of batteries. This is a critical piece of technology advantage, because obviously the cost to go and manage these devices over a long period of time is not driven by the cost of the device. It's driven by the cost of getting people out there in the real world and looking at this stuff. The LoRaWAN, driven by the LoRa Alliance with the global standards, as you've mentioned, Jose, extremely important. That's the thing which is really going to make the big difference to this technology being able to be adopted globally with some sort of degree of predictability about how this is going to work, and give us the flexibility to spread ourselves across much wider use cases. Of course, the flexibility of the technology itself, public versus private networks, macro gateways versus micro and pico gateways. You've got this array of different methodologies of delivery, which no other tech can do. We can't do it with operator technologies. We can't do it with cellular technologies, which are forced into these big, expensive infrastructures. LoRaWAN and the tech that is driven from LoRaWAN is just really flexible in that respect. So I really think that, and also the final part is our industry, our ecosystem is evolving at such an incredible rate. And now what we're seeing is, a few years ago, we had I would always used to say that not all devices are created equal. But now I'm getting to the point where the standards are really kicking in. We're really seeing improvements and really good quality devices coming out.
That's great, Tony. And I'm glad you mentioned about kind of the large ecosystem of providers in the LoRaWAN space, because I agree with that. I think having that large ecosystem that has been primarily driven by the LoRa Alliance and the efforts of the LoRa Alliance over the past 4 or 5 years has really established LoRaWAN as a de facto technology for smart cities. Yeah. When it comes to wireless connectivity, that sort of thing.
Yeah, very much.
Cities can approach the LoRa Alliance and say, hey, we have all these ideas for all of this connectivity that we need in our city, but where do we start? And within the Alliance, there's this large ecosystem. There's hardware vendors, software vendors, system integrators, application developers. It doesn't necessarily have to be a one-stop shop. And sometimes somebody's looking for that one end-to-end solution, but engaging with the Alliance basically gives you access to many different companies that are that are very well equipped to solve certain pieces of the connectivity problem. And so it's really become a good resource for smart cities. Tony, I do have one other question for you directly, and you spoke a little bit about it during your presentation, but as cities and municipalities are often quite concerned about data security when deploying wireless networks, can you maybe comment on how this is being addressed in the LoRaWAN sort of ecosystem?
Yeah, look, this is like the most critical question that we get asked on a daily basis. The transmission of technology now appears to be quite clear. People understand how the tech is working in that respect, but there's still a little bit of this concern wrapped around the exposure around security. And we all know that cities around the world, and for very good reasons, have some of the most stringent security restrictions and limitations around what they're doing around their constituents' data and so forth. So I think it's a very, very important topic, first of all. Now, LoRaWAN as a technology has built into it an end-to-end security profile. It's got built into it that we can have and do have very high levels of encryption running between the generation of data all the way through to the application layer, and by means of two streams of 128-bit AES encryption built into the overall protocol. But I would argue that security goes further than that. Security goes down into the way we manage our devices, the way we are able to monitor the performance of devices, the use of devices, the operation of devices. One of the things that we've implemented here at NNNCo by looking at some of the global standards, not just the LoRaWAN standards, but then taking it a little bit further, and then having in place a system here in Australia, which is our product, our solution set called NTIC, which is where we look at the Tectelic devices and the Aonchip devices have all gone through that program at various times through our work. And of course, they all meet the various standard requirements. And what that does is just very literally looks at the way devices operate, how they join the network, how they've been encrypted, and how that data has been managed. And as a result, we're seeing that really good quality, high level of standardized use of the LoRaWAN standard, which then provides us with the ability to have really good hand-on-heart security conversations with our customers. And just a couple of other quick comments. This is typically it's a wireless technology which typically operates in a free-to-air, or in Australia it's called the Industrial Scientific Medical Band. And it's the 900 megahertz. In Europe, it's 868, for example, the US around 915 megahertz. And these are free to use pieces of spectrum that we can get access to. So I often get asked the question, oh, that's not as secure as using a cellular technology, for example. Well, I can tell you it absolutely is as secure, and it's irrelevant to the conversation when we speak about the type of frequency that we're operating in. And the reason it is that, for example, when we have our telephone and we use our telephone in a dedicated frequency band, which is operated by a particular telecommunications operator, that technology is effectively open to an application to do anything you want with gathering that data. In our world, we're operating at such low powers with the individual sensors which are all individually encrypted into the application layer, that really that kind of level of protection is actually only afforded to some of the highest levels globally. And these devices are doing this on a day-to-day basis. But really the last bit, and I'm going to be a little bit self-absorbed here, I just talk again a little bit about the DL layer. And what I mean by that is, what I find is that cities are saying to me, but I need to protect this data, but I also need to use this data. I need to be able to share this data. How do I do that without breaching my security protocols? And that's another reason why you need some way to be able to add a user without breaching your own protocols, add a user to a system that you can give temporal access to data and limited access via groups and so forth on a very specific area. And then as soon as you finish that person having access, bang, you just switch them off. And these kinds of flexible architecture arrangements, LoRaWAN really lends itself to. It's been built as a flexible network technology, and yet it is very highly secure. I hope that kind of helps.
Yeah, that's excellent. Thank you very much for that, Tony. And I think security is obviously of utmost importance, especially when you're looking at the public sector. So it's important to know sort of what sort of mechanisms are in place to make sure everything's secure. So that's great. Well, that brings us, unfortunately, to the end of our time here today. Jose, Tony, Yannik, thank you very much for your participation on this panel for Smart Cities Week with the LoRa Alliance. I appreciate all of your insights. Hopefully that this was informative and engaging for all of our viewers. So I appreciate your thoughts, and we'll do this again soon sometime.
That'd be great. Thank you, Jack.
Thank you, Jack. Thank you. Thank you, everybody.